Mom!
On the other end of the line, her mother's voice, hoarse with worry and fatigue, cracked like a whip. Chloe, I've been waiting. Where's the money you promised to send? Your siblings are about to have nothing to eat. Chloe took a deep breath. The suffocating air of her Chicago studio apartment seemed to thicken in her chest. I'm trying my best, Mom. Trying your best? She practically screamed, her voice piercing through the cheap phone. That's not what you told me the day you packed your bags and left Havenwood after graduation. You refused to stay and work at the grocery store. You said that life wasn't for you. You swore to the whole family that your finance degree would turn Chicago's skyscrapers into a gold mine. And today, all you can say is, I'm trying. The whole family will starve because of your trying. Chloe. Chloe stared at the pile of rejected job applications on her rickety table. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back a stream of hot tears. Mom, you don't understand. Life in this city, it's not as easy as I thought. A dry click echoed. Her mother had hung up. Chloe had left her small town in West Virginia with a heart full of hope, convinced that with a bachelor's degree in finance, the glamorous doors of the corporate world would swing open for her. She had imagined cool, air-conditioned offices overlooking Lake Michigan, multi-million-dollar contracts that would make her name and save her family from perpetual poverty. But the harsh reality of Chicago dealt her a staggering blow. In the first few weeks after graduation, she threw herself into interviews with naive enthusiasm. Each time it was the same fake smiles, the same sweet words from men in expensive suits. Miss Chloe, your resume is very impressive, they would say, but you know, in a competitive city like this, a degree isn't the only thing that matters. And then came the lecherous gazes, the veiled propositions that sowed disgust in her soul. Before they even discussed internships or starting salaries, they demanded other arrangements, a private meeting at a hotel, a favor, in exchange for an opportunity. She walked out of those polished offices feeling nauseous, her self-respect shattered into ashes. Her meager savings melted away like ice under the summer sun. Every night she counted her last dollars, knowing there would be little left for tomorrow. To get by, she started skipping meals, drinking tap water to soothe her gnawing hunger. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, her boyfriend Mark, who had promised to build a future with her in the city, left without a word. One evening she saw him in a lavish bar in River North, hand in hand with another girl laughing happily. The sight crushed her heart. She didn't even have the strength to be angry. That night alone in her cold studio apartment, she understood. Chicago wasn't a promise. It was a brutal arena. Here dreams were crushed under steel-reinforced concrete, and the naive and weak were devoured without a trace of pity. Chloe could only think of one thing going back to Havenwood. But what would people say about her, the girl who had boasted she would bring a fortune back from the city, now returning empty-handed with a broken spirit? The scornful laughter of her neighbors echoed in her head. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. The next evening, Chloe wandered aimlessly through the streets of Chicago. She no longer had the strength to think. Returning home was impossible. Staying here was unbearable. Every escape route seemed to hit an invisible wall. She stopped in front of a hot dog stand on the sidewalk. Not because she was hungry, she couldn't afford a bun, but just to catch her breath. And that's when she saw it. A gleaming black Cadillac Escalade pulled up a few feet away. From inside stepped a figure she could never forget. Chloe blinked, unable to believe her eyes. Zoe. The young woman turned. A flicker of surprise flashed in her eyes before erupting into a radiant smile. Chloe? Oh my God. Is that really you? They had been roommates in college, studied for exams together, laughed together, and dreamed of a bright future together. But after graduation, their paths had diverged completely. And now Zoe reappeared, completely transformed. Chloe stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the luxury car, the sparkling diamond bracelets on Zoe's wrist, and the confidence that radiated from her like an electric current. Look at you. You haven't changed a bit, Zoe said cheerfully. Get in. Let's go for a drink. It's been too long. Chloe hesitated for a second, feeling out of place in her old clothes. But Zoe insisted, opening the heavy car door herself. Don't be shy, my treat. A few minutes later, they were sitting in a luxurious rooftop bar of a hotel in the Gold Coast, overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. Chloe felt lost like an intruder in a world that wasn't hers. Sitting across from Zoe, she could hardly believe they had once come from the same place, sharing instant noodles in their dorm room. One was shining like a star, the other was sinking into an endless darkness. "Tell me," Zoe began enthusiastically, "where are you working now? Must be a big investment bank, right?" Chloe lowered her head nervously, fiddling with the straw in her glass of water. "Nowhere," she mumbled. Zoe raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, nowhere? You have a finance degree. You were always the smartest in our class." The words felt like shards of glass in Chloe's throat, but she finally let it all out. "Zoe, I can't do it. Every interview is the same. They demand favors before even talking about the job. I refuse and walk out in humiliation. I'm out of money, not a penny to my name. Rent is due, and my mom, she thinks I'm living in luxury. She's waiting for me to send money home to feed my siblings. I can't go back home empty-handed. I'd rather die here." Her voice broke into a sob. In this bar where everything exuded luxury and success, Chloe felt naked, stripped down to her misery. Zoe looked at her for a long moment, her eyes no longer holding their initial cheerfulness. "You know this city isn't for the weak. You have to know how to seize opportunities." Chloe desperately placed her hand on Zoe's. "Help me. You've made it. Tell me your secret, I'm begging you." Zoe sighed, her voice softer. "Listen, Chloe. You've always been a straight arrow. If it's just about the rent, I can help. I can lend you a little. Just enough to get you by while you look for a job." For a moment, Chloe's heart pounded. The temptation to accept the offer burned in her mind. But immediately another voice rose within her, stronger, prouder. She shook her head. "No, Zoe," she said, her voice firmer. "Don't give me a fish. Teach me how to fish." Zoe stared at her, her eyes glinting with a strange light that Chloe couldn't decipher. "You really want to know how I did it?" she finally asked. Chloe nodded desperately. "All right then." Zoe smiled a smile that was both charming and slightly unnerving. "I can help you, but you'll have to be brave, very, very brave." In the following days, Zoe didn't let Chloe drown in her misery. She was like a whirlwind pulling Chloe out of her gloomy studio apartment and into a world she had only seen in magazines. Zoe called constantly, picked her up in the Escalade, and took her to restaurants where the bill for one dinner was equivalent to Chloe's monthly rent. At first, Chloe felt awkward and out of place. She sat stiffly on the leather-upholstered chairs of the restaurants, feeling as though all eyes were on her cheap clothes. But Zoe, with the grace of a seasoned hostess, quickly dispelled the awkwardness. "Don't worry about clothes," Zoe said one afternoon as they were in her luxurious penthouse overlooking Millennium Park. Zoe opened the door to a massive walk-in closet revealing a collection of designer clothes, shoes, and handbags that Chloe could only dream of. "Just pick whatever you like. Consider it yours." Chloe, hesitant at first, eventually let herself be swept away by this enchanting interlude. She tasted steak that melted in her mouth, fresh oysters with the salty taste of the sea, and bubbly champagne that made her feel lightheaded. She wore the silk dresses Zoe lent her, feeling the soft fabric glide against her skin, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a failure when she entered those luxurious places. She breathed in the scent of wealth, a mixture of expensive perfume, new leather, and success, and it almost made her feel like she belonged in this world. Zoe chatted and laughed with her, telling her gossip about Chicago's high society. "See, Chloe," she said, sipping a cocktail. "This city isn't so harsh when you know which doors to knock on." Chloe smiled nervously, but deep down a hint of jealousy began to creep in. How did she do it? What was this secret path that she seemed to know by heart one evening as they were sitting on the balcony of Zoe's apartment watching the skyscrapers sparkle like diamonds against the night sky? Zoe turned to her and asked in a casual tone, "Do you think I'm the only one who's this successful?" Chloe was surprised. "What do you mean? What are you trying to say?" Zoe smiled faintly, a mysterious smile. Jessica, you remember her, right? The one who was always late for our accounting classes. Chloe nodded. Jessica was a fun but somewhat absent-minded girl. Now, Zoe continued, she lives in a mansion in Lincoln Park with a private pool, drives a Maserati. She even just took her mom on a month-long trip to Italy. And believe me, it wasn't thanks to her accounting degree. Chloe's eyes widened. No, really? Zoe chuckled softly. Really? And what about Maya, the shy girl who never dared to raise her hand in class? Well, now she owns an art gallery in the West Loop. People think she has a silent investor, but the truth is, she had the courage to cross a line that others didn't dare to. Chloe swallowed hard. She couldn't imagine her former classmates who came from ordinary backgrounds just like her, transforming into such powerful and enviable women. Zoe continued, her voice like a seductive whisper. You see, Chloe, all those who dared to do things differently are now living like queens. And those who hesitated, who followed the rules, are still stuck in their crappy studio apartments waiting for a miracle that never comes. Zoe's words were like daggers to Chloe's heart. She thought of her musty apartment, her mother's desperate voice on the phone, the pitying looks of her neighbors if she returned to Havenwood empty-handed. A wave of anger and determination rose within her. She was tired of being the weak one, the failure. Zoe concluded, her voice as firm as a verdict. The world has no pity for the weak Chloe, but for those with courage, it gives everything. Chloe looked into Zoe's eyes, which glittered under the city lights. She no longer felt fear, only a promise and escape. She had tasted the other world, and she couldn't go back to her old life. Then show me, Chloe finally whispered, her voice trembling but full of determination. I'm ready. Zoe smiled, a satisfied and knowing smile. Good. Then get ready. Tomorrow night you will see for yourself what I've been talking about. Night had long fallen when Zoe signaled for Chloe to get into the car. The atmosphere inside the luxurious Escalade no longer held the cheerful lightness of the past few days. It was thick with silence and an unnamed sense of anticipation. They drove, leaving the glittering towers of the Loop behind, delving into the darker streets of the city, where the neon lights faded, giving way to faint orange streetlights. Where are we going? Chloe finally spoke, her voice a soft echo in the silence. Zoe smiled faintly, her eyes still on the road ahead. To the home of someone who can change your life. The car stopped in front of an old brownstone in a quiet, almost forgotten neighborhood of Chicago. It looked completely ordinary, no different from the other houses on the block, but there was something about the silence that enveloped it that made Chloe shiver. Zoe got out of the car without hesitation and walked up the stone steps. She knocked 3 times on the heavy wooden door, a firm and familiar rhythm. The door opened, and an elderly man appeared. He was tall, with neatly combed white hair, but his eyes were black deep and seemed to see through everything. He said nothing, just glanced at Zoe, and then turned his gaze to Chloe, a look that made her feel stripped bare. "Good evening, sir," Zoe said with a deference Chloe had never seen in her before. The man just nodded and stepped back, motioning for them to enter. The house inside was dark and smelled of incense, old candle wax, and the dust of time. Chloe felt her legs weaken, a primal instinct screaming at her to turn and run. She took a step back, but Zoe quickly grabbed her arm. "Be brave," Zoe whispered in her ear, her voice both reassuring and commanding. "It's for your own good." The old man approached. He no longer looked at Zoe, focusing only on Chloe. "Is this her—" His voice was deep and hoarse, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Zoe nodded. From a wooden box on the table, he pulled out an object. In the dim light, Chloe saw it was a thin blade made from a black stone as shiny as obsidian. Reflexively, Chloe raised her hands to defend herself, trying to pull away from Zoe's grip. But just then 2 women emerged from the shadows of the hallway. They were dressed in black, their faces impassive, and they moved with a frightening silence. They easily held Chloe, their strength astonishing. Chloe began to struggle in panic. "No, Zoe, what have you done to me?" She screamed, her heart feeling like it would burst from her chest. Her worst nightmare was coming true. Shh, Zoe whispered, leaning close to her face, her eyes devoid of emotion. Endure it. You'll see tomorrow. The obsidian blade cut into her back. Chloe let out a piercing scream, a scream swallowed by the silent walls of the house. The pain was unbearable, searing hot, as if a red-hot iron was being pressed against her flesh. One cut, then a second, and a third. Each cut was deeper, more painful than the last. The man then took out a thick black ointment from a ceramic jar. He rubbed it into the open wounds. The smell was unbearable, a disgusting mixture of fresh blood, damp earth, and some kind of rotting herb. Chloe choked tears and snot streaming down her face. From this night on, the man said, his voice echoing like a prophecy, no man will be able to resist you. Their eyes will be set upon you, and their hearts will be captured. The two women released her. Chloe collapsed to the floor, her whole body trembling, her back feeling like it was on fire. Zoe squatted beside her, her eyes shining with a strange satisfaction. Come on, Chloe, it's done. You've crossed the threshold. Chloe's whole body was shaking violently. She couldn't say a word. The old man had stood up straight. He wiped the blade with a black cloth and then turned to her, who was crumpled on the floor. Listen carefully, daughter, he said. As soon as you leave here, men will look at you differently. Your scent, your smile, everything about you will become a trap for them. They will pursue you, give you wealth, open every door for you. But remember this, for every favor you receive, for every bill you count, you owe the blood that was shed tonight. You have been marked. These words were etched into Chloe's mind despite the pain and panic that enveloped her. Zoe helped her up, her body limp like a rag doll. She gently guided Chloe to the door. Once they were settled in the car, Zoe whispered, Rest now. You'll see tomorrow. Your life will never be the same. The next day, Chloe woke up feeling like she had been run over by a truck. Her back was burning, every muscle in her body stiff with pain. She dragged herself to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. It was the same face with tired eyes and dark circles, but something had changed. A stillness, a cold confidence she had never seen before resided in her gaze. She was no longer the young girl who was ignored in the crowd. When she went out to a nearby coffee shop, the change was frighteningly obvious. Men's gazes clung to her like invisible hooks. Passers-by turned their heads, unable to look away. A young office worker rushing to work walked into a lamppost while staring at her. The barista, a guy who usually just mumbled orders, now stammered and spilled milk on the counter when she smiled. It wasn't ordinary admiration. It was a fascination almost hypnotic. Later that afternoon, while walking along the Chicago Riverwalk, a man in an expensive Armani suit who looked like a high-level executive politely stopped her. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, his voice slightly trembling. But I just wanted to say, your smile just brightened my entire day. Chloe just smiled her thanks, but the man didn't leave. He pulled out a leather wallet and discreetly handed her a small envelope. For you, he whispered, just to see you smile again. Chloe couldn't believe it. Inside the envelope was $5,000 in cash. A few days later, an older real estate mogul, whom she happened to meet in the elevator of an office building, took her shopping on Michigan Avenue. He insisted she pick out anything she wanted at Saks Fifth Avenue, from glamorous evening gowns to $1,000 handbags, and flatly refused to let her pay. After that, the gifts became bigger, more substantial. Money flowed in like a river that had finally been unblocked. Zoe looked at her with a satisfied smile when they met again. See, I told you, she said, sipping champagne. From now on, you don't have to chase after things. Things will chase after you. And it was true. In less than a month, Chloe had received more money than she could have earned in a dozen years of honest work. Very quickly, Chloe realized that her prey was not young men or hesitant bachelors. No, her true targets, those who seemed irresistibly drawn to her aura, were married men, executives, politicians, men who were model fathers in the eyes of society. Although they had stable homes, beautiful wives, and well-behaved children in Chloe's presence, all those fortresses crumbled. A simple smile from her was enough to crack their marriage vows. A deep look made them sway and forget all their responsibilities. They called her at all hours, making up clumsy excuses to be away from home. They spent money lavishly just to secure a spot in her schedule. Some became so obsessed that they neglected their work. A renowned lawyer gifted her a brand new Lexus without even getting an intimate date. Another, a stockbroker, sold a portion of his family's portfolio to give her cash. Their obsession had a price. They wanted her presence, her smile, her complicit glances, sometimes just a quiet evening by their side. They wanted a taste of the magical aura she exuded since the night of the ritual. Chloe understood that her body, her companionship, and her willingness had become a silent currency of exchange. She was no longer the young girl begging for an internship. Now she manipulated the most influential men in the city, becoming a pleasant confidant, a moment of escape for them from their own suffocating lives. In return, she received assets that no honest salary could provide. Soon she felt more powerful than ever. A luxurious duplex in River North was gifted to her, almost without her having to ask. In Chicago's high society, she became a mystery, a shooting star. Her college friends, still struggling with low-paying jobs, now looked at her with a mixture of admiration and envy. She, the country girl from West Virginia, once ignored and humiliated, had become a queen of the Windy City. The first time she called her mother, her voice trembled with joy and pride. "Mom," she said, "I'm sending you some money tomorrow. Just go to the bank and withdraw it, pay off all the bills, and buy everything your siblings need." Her mother, unable to believe her ears, broke down in tears on the phone. "God bless you, my daughter. Finally, you've saved our family. Keep it up, honey. Send more." Her mother's voice trembled with pride. But behind that pride was a new demand, a growing expectation. No matter how much Chloe gave, it was never enough. She was no longer the same person. The hard days, the anxious nights, the sobs in her studio apartment seemed to belong to another life, another person. She had paid the price with blood and pain, and now she was enjoying her reward. Zoe guided Chloe in this new world, like an older sister teaching her younger sibling the rules of power. And soon another figure joined their circle, Maya, the shy classmate from before, now the owner of a prestigious art gallery. Their reunion took place around a table laden with champagne and exquisite seafood in an exclusive restaurant. The three young women laughed heartily, their laughter echoing sparkling like diamonds. Chloe looked at them mesmerized. Zoe with her calm confidence, Maya with her bold radiance, and herself discovering that she could hold her own among them. "See, Chloe?" Maya said, raising her glass, her eyes sparkling. "Life doesn't wait for the timid. If you want to shine, you have to know how to burn." Zoe added with a smirk, "We are queens, and men are just the royal treasury serving our desires." They clinked glasses, the sound of crystal ringing like a sealed promise. At night they frequented Chicago's most exclusive clubs, their laughter drowning out the envious glances of other women. Chloe was intoxicated with a new kind of high, the high of power, money, and sweet revenge on the life that had once crushed her. In her triumphant ascent, Chloe thought no man could escape her. She believed she had the world at her feet. It happened at a charity gala held at the luxurious Peninsula Hotel, one of the premier social events where politicians, artists, and business titans gathered. Chloe was invited by one of her patrons, a senator, who never tired of showing her off as his latest conquest. That night, Chloe was the center of attention. She wore a crimson silk dress that clung to her body, provocatively revealing the faint scars on her back. She reveled in the attention, moving among the guests with the air of a queen accustomed to being worshipped. That's when she saw him for the first time. Arthur Vance. He wasn't in the noisy crowd. He was standing in a corner, quietly conversing with two foreign investors. He didn't have the flashy appearance of the other men she had conquered. He wore a perfectly tailored but unassuming suit. There was a calmness, a weight to his demeanor that seemed to make everyone around him lower their voices. "That's Arthur Vance, owner of Vance Properties and VTech Corporation," someone whispered in her ear. "A true empire. They say he's one of the most powerful yet most private men in the city. Chloe's heart beat faster. This was it. This was the peak. He was richer, more respected than all the men she had conquered combined. Conquering a man like him would be the ultimate confirmation of her power. At the end of the evening, she cleverly arranged to cross his path as he was getting his coat. A perfect smile, a trivial excuse about dropping her shawl was enough to start a conversation. Arthur Vance turned, helping her pick up the shawl. He replied politely, a discreet smile gracing his lips, but his gaze remained remarkably steady. While so many men had lost their composure, becoming flustered at the sight of her, he remained still, almost unmoved. "A pleasure to meet you," he said, his voice deep and warm. "Chloe," she replied in an almost melodic tone, the voice that had enchanted so many men. He nodded, neither lingering nor rushing. After a few pleasantries, he politely excused himself, called away by his business partners. He walked away, leaving Chloe standing there with her silk shawl in hand. For the first time since the ritual, Chloe felt her power slide off someone like water off a stone. Not a single tremor, not a spark of desire, not a single sign that her charm was working. He was simply polite and indifferent. As his back disappeared from view, Chloe felt a strange sensation. It wasn't disappointment, but a humiliation. Her pride was wounded, and at that moment, she felt a sharp stabbing pain in her back right over the old scars. The pain was fleeting, but it was enough to make her take a deep breath. Arthur Vance's resistance didn't discourage her. On the contrary, it turned him into an obsession. He had become the ultimate challenge, and Chloe was determined to have him at any cost. After their first encounter at the gala, Chloe had only one obsession: Arthur Vance. But she knew he wasn't the type of man who could be approached with trivial flattery or flirtatious glances. She needed a strategy, a solid reason, so she approached him under a new guise. Not as the beautiful, kept woman many knew her as, but as an ambitious young investor. She meticulously researched Vance Properties, found a complex real estate development project his company was launching, and prepared a fake but professional-looking investment proposal. Arthur Vance, professionally intrigued by a young woman claiming to be ready to invest a large sum, agreed to give her his time. Their first meeting took place in his office, a minimalist yet powerful space on the top floor of one of the skyscrapers bearing his name. Chloe wore a tailored business suit, her hair in a neat bun. She presented her plan articulately, using all the financial knowledge she had learned. However, behind every number, every chart was another plan. Every sentence, every deep gaze, every time she casually let her hand brush across the table as she pushed documents towards him, were arrows she shot to break through his armor. But nothing happened. Arthur Vance remained completely professional, showing no emotion. He listened attentively, asked sharp questions, and finally concluded politely that he would have his team review the proposal. That very evening, when she thought she had made an impression, her scars burned. A dull, uncomfortable pain lasted for hours, as if reacting to her failure. But she didn't stop. She requested another meeting, this time at a fancy restaurant, under the pretext of discussing the project details further. During the meal, she used every trick in her arsenal of seduction. She pretended to touch his hand when reaching for her wineglass. She told witty stories. She offered him her most radiant smiles. Vance remained polite, intelligently countering her arguments, but his gaze never wavered. On the contrary, with each forced smile, with each attempt at seduction, he seemed to retreat further behind an invisible barrier. The pain came faster this time. In the middle of their conversation, her scars began to throb intensely. She had to bite her lip to keep from wincing. Her back burned as if hot coals were stuck to her skin. "Are you all right, Miss Chloe?" he asked, and for the first time, she saw a hint of genuine concern in his eyes, but it was the concern of a polite person for their companion, not the interest of an attracted man. Yes, I'm fine," she lied, her voice slightly strained. "Miss Chloe," Arthur Vance said calmly after a moment of silence, "if you are truly interested in investing, we can speak again with the official documents and our respective lawyers. If not..." He paused, and his gaze suddenly sharpened as if seeing through her intentions. I think neither of us has time to waste. She had to end the dinner early, feigning a migraine. As soon as she got back to her duplex, she collapsed on the living room floor, her back in agony. Now she understood. There was a direct connection. The more she tried to break through Arthur Vance's defenses, the more her demonic wounds hurt. Any other woman faced with Arthur Vance's polite but firm rejection would have given up. After all, Chloe had plenty of options. Other powerful men were still lining up at her door, ready to go into debt to ruin their families for one of her smiles. But Vance was different. He didn't just resist. He had completely ignored her spell. And that Chloe could not accept. It was no longer about money or gifts. She had more than enough. It wasn't even about social climbing anymore. What she sought was the ultimate proof of her absolute power. Vance embodied everything she wanted to conquer. Conquering a man like him would be like planting her flag on the summit of Mount Everest. It would be the confirmation that no one, absolutely no one, could escape her. Her wounded pride could not bear the thought of failure. If he resists me, it means I haven't given my all. I have to attack harder. I have to have him, she told herself, gritting her teeth through the stabbing pain in her back. She did a little investigation and soon discovered something surprising. The Vance family was known in their neighborhood not only for their wealth, but also for their piety. His wife, Catherine, was a woman who rarely appeared in public, but was actively involved in their church's charitable activities. It was said she prayed constantly, asking for God's protection for her husband and children. A source revealed that once a week the entire Vance family would gather in their living room. Father, mother, and children, hand in hand, would raise their voices in a collective prayer. Every morning before leaving for school or the office, the children would place their hands on their father, repeating their mother's prayer. Lord, please protect Dad. Keep him from all evil. Build a wall of fire around him. Those simple, innocent words, the unity of a family in faith, had become an invisible shield. There was nothing Chloe could do about it. Her charm, her laughter, all of it slid off him like water off holy stone. Each time she tried to orchestrate a chance encounter, her wounds would open from the inside, burning her as if invisible knives were plowing through her flesh. Her power, which had subdued so many married men, shattered here against a family that prayed together. I can't lose, she told herself, cold sweat beading on her forehead. But for the first time since the ritual, Chloe felt her power weakening. A man had resisted her. Worse, each attempt left her wounded, burned, and weakened. After Arthur Vance, something seemed to have permanently broken inside her. After the failure with Arthur Vance, nothing was the same. Although Chloe continued her conquests, something had broken. Her absolute confidence was gone, replaced by a vague fear. The men who had once knelt at her feet began to show signs of backing away. Some suddenly avoided her without explanation. A businessman whose life she had nearly destroyed told her over the phone one evening, I saw you in a dream, Chloe. Your face was covered in bleeding wounds. Don't come near me anymore. Then he hung up and disappeared from her life. Chloe didn't understand. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was still radiant. Her smile was still irresistible. But at night, a recurring nightmare haunted her. She saw faceless women, the wives of the men she had seduced, kneeling in prayer. She didn't know their faces, but their prayers attacked her like fiery arrows, and each prayer was aimed directly at the scars on her back. Every morning after these dreams, the scars would throb, burning so intensely that she was bedridden. The truth gradually dawned on her in a horrifying way. The wives' prayers, like those of the Vance family, were destroying her from the inside. And then the sign she could no longer hide appeared: the smell. At first it was a discreet, slightly fishy odor that she attributed to sweat or an infection in her scars. She tried to cover it with the most expensive perfumes, the most fragrant body lotions. But soon, even thick layers of fragrance were not enough. The smell persisted, clinging to her. In the club, some men wrinkled their noses when they got close. She saw them frown, their gazes turning away. Do you smell that? One whispered. Yes, it's coming from her. What a strange smell, like something is rotting. Another replied in disbelief. How can such a beautiful woman give off such a smell? Zoe, who arrived a few minutes later, was brave enough to say it to her face. You smell strange today, Chloe. Chloe's cheeks flushed. She forced a laugh. Oh, it must be the heat, or maybe my perfume has gone bad. But deep down, shame was crushing her because she knew the truth. It wasn't the heat or the perfume. It was a pungent odor that clung to her skin, stronger than the most expensive lotions, more persistent than repeated washings. That night she rushed home and slammed the door. She scrubbed her body with antibacterial soap lemon, the strongest essential oils. It was useless. The smell clung to her like a second skin, a tangible punishment. Zoe was the first to distance herself. One evening in a club where they used to meet, Chloe felt Zoe deliberately turning her back on her. When she tried to approach, Zoe pretended not to see her, laughing loudly with a new group of friends. Zoe, I saw you. Why are you pretending? Chloe confronted her. Zoe finally looked at her, her gaze cold and dry. Chloe, you're embarrassing me. You're not the same anymore. We can't be seen together if you keep drawing attention this way. Maya followed suit not long after. She tried to remain loyal for a while, but during one dinner the smell became so strong that Maya had to leave the table. When Chloe begged her to stay, she sighed heavily. Sister, I can't. You're embarrassing me, I'm sorry. And she too disappeared from her life. Chloe found herself completely alone, wandering through her luxurious duplex, her jewelry laid out on the table like worthless trophies. The calls that had once been incessant had stopped. Her phone was terrifyingly silent. In her growing isolation, Chloe tried one last resort. She went to the old brownstone where her fate had been sealed. She sat before the old man, tears streaming down her cheeks. Sir, please help me. The smell, the pain, the men who are leaving me. I'm nothing anymore. Only you can save me. The old man slowly shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. Save you, daughter. I gave you a power, but you used it recklessly. You tried to penetrate a fortress protected by faith and prayer. You dared to challenge a greater power. That's when your scars turned against you. That's when your smell was born. So you can't do anything, not even renew the pact? Chloe asked desperately. No, he said, his voice firm. What you carry now is not a mark I can control. It's a curse that you yourself have awakened. I cannot extinguish the fire you have lit on your own back. It's too late. Go back where you came from. You chose your path, and it leads to only one end. The following days were the worst of her life. Her scars, once discreet, had turned into open weeping sores. Terrified, she finally went to the hospital. The doctors, after examining her, exchanged awkward glances. They said they had never seen a case like it, that the wounds were not healing but were on the contrary getting larger. They prescribed antibiotics, ointments, bandages. It was useless. Each treatment seemed to only worsen the smell and the pain. The money stopped coming in. To survive, to pay the enormous medical bills, she began to dip into her savings, the millions she had once proudly accumulated. Each expense was a bitter reminder that everything she had earned from her scars was now being burned away to try to soothe those same scars. When her savings ran out and the city became a hell of accusatory glances, Chloe made a decision to return to Havenwood. But home was no longer a refuge. As she parked her now old Lexus in the driveway, her mother ran out, her face radiant. But as soon as she got close enough to hug her, her smile vanished. Her embrace was abruptly released, her nostrils flared. Chloe, what is this? What is that smell? Heartbroken, Chloe told her everything, but in the end, it was not compassion that came from her mother's mouth, but anger and shame. Why did you come back here? Do you want the whole town to laugh at us? Do you want people to call me the mother of the stinky one? Very quickly, Chloe's smell became the main topic of conversation in town. Her own family, out of shame, began to avoid her. She had lost her friends, her men, her money. And now even her family rejected her. One early morning she got back in her car, her belongings hastily thrown in the trunk. She left Havenwood like an exile with nowhere to go. Back in Chicago, she locked herself in her duplex now, a gilded prison. She no longer dared to go out. The queen of yesterday had become an invisible hermit, locked in a cage that smelled of suffering and loneliness. It is often said, everyone does it and it works. But when it's your turn, you become the example for others. Shortcuts that seem appealing never bring true advancement, only a fleeting illusion followed by shame and ruin. Chloe had learned that, but the price was everything she had and herself.